So in an interview with Politics Joe, Nigel Farage claims that Jeremy Corbyn and himself are anti-establishment.
We spoke to someone earlier who used to be a Jeremy Corbyn voter,
Yeah.
and he's moved towards reform. What do you think the crossover is there, if any?
Oh, well, anti-establishment, obviously. A sense that the giant corporates now dominate the world that we live in, that politics is very much in the pockets of the big corporates. And it's where it's where my thinking and Corbyn's does cross over. I mean, Corbyn was a Eurosceptic right from the very start because he thought that what Brussels would do is be good for big banks and big businesses and bad for everybody else. Well, he was pretty much right. So there are some crossovers, yeah. And similarly, quite a lot of Trump voters would in the past have thought Bernie Sanders was the guy that they would have voted for. And the unfairness of the economic system as it's currently structured.
Now, I'm going to explain how this is just complete rubbish. I mean, they share nothing in common, and Farage is not anti-establishment. So here he talks about the corporate elites and how they both want to take them on. That is true for Jeremy Corbyn. He's a socialist. In his past manifestos, he called for the redistribution of wealth and power. But Farage saying he's against the corporate elite, I mean, that is a lie. He's in bed with literal billionaires. He's never proposed any policies that would curb corporate power. He's never supported increasing taxes on them. He's never talked about economic democracy or workers having more power. He's not ever supported unions and workers' rights. In fact, when Angela Rayner's severely watered-down workers' package was proposed, Reform voted against it. They voted against workers' protections. He then talks about Euroscepticism. Well, the entire Labour Party used to be Eurosceptics. Hilary Benn was against the EU at one point. Now he's a darling Liberal Remainer. Benn and many others in the Labour Party shifted their position on the EU, and so did Jeremy Corbyn, by the way. He supported Remain in the 2016 referendum. Now, I will grant that he didn't shift at the same time as the rest of the party, mainly under Blair, and Corbyn has always critiqued the EU, as he should do, because it's not a perfect institution. So Farage and Corbyn have nothing in common. But Farage is trying to be clever. He wants to go after the disaffected voters, those angry with the Labour Party. He even spoke about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. There's an apparent crossover. Now, Sanders was more popular with Republican and MAGA voters than any other Democrat. However, an overwhelming majority of Bernie voters backs the Democrat candidate. Farage is basically doing the bullshit horseshoe theory, and it's only going to enable the agrocentrists. It's going to confirm that their false belief that the far left and right are the same, even though Corbyn isn't far left. But tell me, when has Corbyn been reactionary on immigration or on refugee policy? Is he a social conservative? How are their economic policies aligned? None. So what is this conflation that Farage is leaning into? And I'm sure he knows himself that this is bullshit. And I don't think he believes in the horseshoe theory. The reason why centrists think it exists is because they don't understand populism. So if I were to say that there was one commonality between the left and the right, it's simply that they do engage in populism. And we've tried left populism, but the centrists and the liberals did their best to destroy left-wing populism. We are now left with right-wing populism. So good job, guys. Now, why has this come up? Well, it was sparked by this video.
I voted Jeremy Corbyn in 2019. I'm fundamentally a populist. I'm against the establishment. The establishment, Labour and Tory, have failed us. Tories for the last 14 years, Labour before them, and they opened the doors and everything that went on with that. And I actually had a look this morning where the highest turnout was and where the lowest turnout. The highest turnout was in Winchester, it was in Cambridge, it was Liberal, Lib Dem and Labour seat stronghold, right? The lowest turnout, you were looking at 25% in some cases, was in Yorkshire and Humber, and it was in Lincolnshire. These are all places where Conservatives won and the Reform was second place in nearly all these seats. So you're seeing a situation where most normal people have no way of getting their voice out. They have no representatives in government, but they represent 40% of the country. Are disgusted. They're horrified by what's going on in this country. And they're all going to vote for Reform. And if we can get the thing you typically don't vote to vote, I mean, it'll be a Trump-esque landslide in 2029 if we can mobilise that support.
Look, there's a difference between voters who liked Corbyn, who then moved on to Reform, and a guy like this who is clearly a political activist. I mean, he doesn't give any actual reasons or policies, because the policies are vastly different from Corbyn to Reform. So in that instance, not gonna lie, he kind of looks more like a plant to try and hoover up disaffected voters. Now, David Aranovich, who is an agrocentrist, decided to weigh in with a gross lie about Corbyn. So in response to Daniel Finkelstein, he tweeted, "A shift that's been coming, really interesting and important," and that's sharing the Politics Joe video where Farage says him and Corbyn are both anti-establishment. David Aranovich then says, "Not really, Danny. Nothing in Farage's economic or distributive agenda ties into Corbyn's. They both like Putin, but other than that, reform is a one-trick pony. It's an above all anti-immigrant party." Well, Jeremy Corbyn responded and he said, "David, you know full well that your characterization of me is totally false. Delete this lie immediately." He then comes back and says, "It's my belief that in consistently arguing over the years that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was the responsibility of the West and that NATO is behind the escalation in the region, you have acted as Putin's ally." And there's me there saying, "Oh, it's your belief, so you're chatting shit here then." Now, the first part of the tweet is right. I mean, they don't share any politics. There's nothing about their economic agenda which is the same. But then to go on to smear Corbyn as a Putin lover and that he somehow blames the West for the Russian invasion. I mean, he's never done that, and this is what he said back in 2022. "Russia's shocking invasion of Ukraine will inevitably lead to more fear, misery, and death. It's a frightening escalation of the ongoing crisis. Russia must withdraw its troops and return to diplomacy. If it does not, dark days are ahead for Ukraine, Russia, and all of Europe." Pretty clear cut there, he's condemning Russia. Whereas Farage, on the other hand, I mean, he's actually praised Putin, just like Tony Blair has praised Putin. Corbyn consistently, for decades, has been calling out Vladimir Putin when you've had so-called sensible centrists gassing him up. So with Farage doing this, it's almost a centrist wet dream. I think they'll love this because they can use this interview to attack the left once again. But will this playbook work? I'm not sure, but I think it can. I know Reform voters who liked Jeremy Corbyn still like him, who believe that he was treated terribly by the Labour Party. So the anti-establishment rhetoric works, but the point is, only one of them is actually anti-establishment, and it's not Nigel Farage.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.